Fresh off the selection committee's bombshell of UConn being an 8 seed, we're going to find out if UConn was properly seeded with our bracketologist, Rocco Miller. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I wanted to come up to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all of your support. If you like the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow anywhere you see an audio button on your phone, whether that's Apple, Spotify, the whole deal. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men and women's basketball program, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage that you deserve. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Okay, let's bring to the stage a man who is in high demand, Rocco Miller of the Bracketeer.org. Rocco, I think I know the answer to this question. Was UConn properly seeded?
I believe so. Yeah, that's where my forecast had UConn. Hi, Mark. Good to see you again. Great to be back on the show.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, I think what it come down to is this year we had a abnormally large cluster of teams, maybe starting with the back of the 4 seed line all the way spilling into the 8s that had very, deserving attributes of their resume, I guess you could say. Maybe not the strongest overall resumes, but still did enough to kind of make you raise your eyebrows. Whether it was Missouri, who had a win at Florida that aged like crazy well. I think they're the only team all year to win at the Swamp. You had some big brands like UCLA and Kansas that you kind of just knew the committee was. If it was a 7-8 decision, it probably leans 7. That ends up happening for both. The big wild cards were St. Mary's, Gonzaga. They end up falling much lower than I had them. I thought they would be able to get a 6. St. Mary's a 7, Gonzaga also an 8, just like UConn. But my point is, with those teams I listed, plus another chunk of teams that all just had a variety of wow factors, whether it was their performance measurements, their big resume wins, or a combination of both. It made it both. It wasn't just UConn. It was also UConn, Creighton, and Mississippi State were just in a different group based on the fact that, UConn had that Seton Hall loss. You had other things that you just had to own. Obviously, Marquette and Creighton on the road were good road wins. But the Colorado loss in Maui, of course, and then Seton Hall loss made UConn stand out as more of a team that had those 2 bad losses and basically middling stats across the board. Is it 6-6 quad 1, 9-8 away from stores, which isn't bad, but
Right.
some other teams just had a little bit more juice to work with.
Absolutely. No. And really, when I look at the bracket, what's interesting to me, the first thing that jumped out, if we're going to go Big East for a second here. Creighton as a 9 is a really interesting choice, considering that UConn's an 8. I'm the biggest UConn fan that you'll ever find. But let me tell you something. Creighton is not a 9. Like Creighton beat the doors off of us for about 14 of the 40 minutes of play in the Big East tournament. They beat UConn in stores, and then UConn was able to, on a essentially a transcendent performance, was able to beat them in Omaha. So a place that they don't win. So where does head-to-head matchup come in with selection committee at all? Like when you start to think about stuff like that.
It certainly can matter, especially in a league like the Big East this year, where 5 teams got in, but there were only you had the one super strong team in the end with St. John's, and then Marquette, Creighton, and UConn 2 through 4 were very bunched up, especially on the seed list. So everybody seemed to kind of chew off each other and then land sort of in the middle. What you're always doing is looking at the body of work and then just comparing teams. That's it. So they could end up in your same league. They usually aren't, especially the Big East, like a team with a league with only 5 bids. But it just worked out that way. And the way I think it played out for the committee was, especially just kind of going over other parts of the bracket, and this has happened before, basically anything that didn't happen before Thursday afternoon, meaning like lose your first game of the tournament, whether it's the Big East, we saw West Virginia lose to Colorado. That had to have mattered, right? They're pretty much already got their pecking order established by Friday, for better or for worse. And maybe that's not the best way to explain it, because I know they can motion teams to move above, etc. But I thought both were 8s, so I was surprised to see Creighton a 9 just for that reason.
Before we get into the next topic, which is essentially this is where we'll go to a break here in about a minute, but a question around we talked about this a little bit last time.
Yeah.
You've asked questions to the selection committee of how they've done things, and I know it's too early probably for you to have done that now, but or maybe you have. My question is, in the past, like how have they chosen teams? Like, for example, like give us an example of, if you have, I'm not talking about blind resumes, but if you have team A and team B and it's very close, how do they make those distinctions? Like what have been the prime reasons in the past?
Well, the backbone statement that almost every chairman has said, I didn't hear it yesterday, which based on the results, I'm not surprised we didn't hear it, but it was one of the rare years you haven't heard it, is who did you play, where did you play, and how did you do? Meaning that the committee is encouraging programs at all levels to challenge themselves away from home. Mm-hmm. And I feel like slowly but surely with the quad net system, this is now our 6th NCAA tournament with that system, 7th year overall. Of course, we got no tournament in 2020. That message has slowly gone away. And it's really unfortunate to see, because I really don't know what to tell teams if they're not in a power league, how to get in that large bid, because after what I saw yesterday, it's virtually impossible. There might have been a world where 30-3 Drake gets left out if they don't win the Valley, things like that. It's like, wow, how many games do these teams have to win that are not easy games, not easy road trips? UC Irvine, not even mentioned on the show. I didn't expect them to get in, but led the country in road wins, had 18 wins away from home. For all we know, they didn't even discuss them. So, yeah, it's I think from a sport-wide perspective, and again, I see the sport probably different than the majority of the public, and so I get it. It's a business. You got to make good business decisions. You got to get eyeballs on these first 2 days in Dayton if you're Turner/TBS. And so, I think that had to have played a factor in the last 2 teams. And they weren't even the last 2 teams in, but there were 2 teams that I pretty strongly disagree with on the committee, and that usually doesn't happen. Usually I can see why. Right. I'm usually wrong on maybe 1 team a year, and I can totally justify it. And this year, it's just really hard to do that.
We're going to take a break, but I want to jump on what you said about, being a business and getting eyeballs, because I have a great example of why I understand it in the past and why you can't justify it going forward. We're going to talk about that with Rocco coming back after the break. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and all the new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College Basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From the top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada clear-cut Team of the Week is the Florida Gators. The Gators, led by Walter Clayton, 17 points a game, just dominated the SEC tournament, winning each game by at least 9 points. Not only did Florida grab the 4th number 1 seed, but they are the nation's most efficient offense. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. That's exactly what the Florida Gators have done. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out here to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can have in the all-new Nissan Armada or any Nissan outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, with no health exam is required. As a parent, I want to make sure my family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric gives me that peace of mind. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at fabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health concerns. Do have the first mention of the brand be fabric, and all subsequent brand mentions just be fabric. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, we're here with Rocco Miller of the Bracketeer.org. I like to refer to him as my bracketologist. So here's my question for you. And I always harken back to the SoCon days. Okay, when I think it was 2018, you had UNCG was one of the last few teams potentially in, and they were bumped by Arizona State and Danny Hurley's brother, Bobby Hurley, and they were the last team in. You could look at the resumes. You can make a case for both teams. Okay. But the business decision is who wants to see, no disrespect to Wes and those boys, UNCG playing Dayton versus Bobby Hurley, two-time national champion. He's a Hurley. He's basically college basketball royalty, and his squad, playing the first four. This year, you have North Carolina inexplicably gets in. John Rothstein called it a miscarriage of justice. Might be a little too strong for my blood, but I get it. I totally understand where he's coming from. And the teams that are left behind aren't exactly the UNCGs of the world. You got Indiana. I mean, give or take a few years, they're a blue blood. And, then you have West Virginia, a Big 12 team that went 10-10 in the Big 12. So make sense of that from the business. If you can't, you can't. Just like, what did you think of that?
Well, the Carolina thing is interesting. I had already put a lot of weight on it. So that's what I think that's the part I want to explain is my entire body of work that I do for my website and for all the, Field 68, all that stuff I'm part of is to try to tell and educate the public on what the process is and why certain things are possible and certain things aren't possible. And I've learned a lot over the years. I have a bubble workbook. I have an entire workbook for all teams considered for the tournament, whether it's the 12 to 16 seeds, the top 4 seeds, or the bubble. I do it all, and I break it down by category. If I learn of a new category, I'll add it for next year. And I don't know if I should for next year, but I might need to add television ratings because it's going through the process and studying it, and then also putting a lot of weight on North Carolina already on my own, on the Bubba Cunningham factor being the chairman. I had put North Carolina in my field, even though if I was voting, I probably wouldn't have. I'm just trying to tell the public what I think is going to happen. So I had them in my field the morning of the Duke game. Then they take another loss. Then you look at their record again, and they're 1-12 in that top quad. Obviously, 3 of those losses to Duke. They played Auburn, played Michigan State. They had a lot of good wins, a lot of quote unquote good losses at the top. But you got to prove at one point that none of that matters unless you beat one of them. Anybody can go lose to them.
Right.
And I get it. Carolina played better in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I would not be surprised if they go and take this bid and get a couple wins and try to change the narrative. But that I don't think that's necessary or applicable because this is about the process that goes on in the room to get the right teams that have the credentials to enter into the most important tournament in this country. And what ended up happening for me was not only did North Carolina lose that day, but Colorado State took the Mountain West auto bid. A team that we did not have forecasted. So that took a spot. And for me, I was working really hard just to find North Carolina a spot. So when Colorado State won, I was like, okay, surely there's no room for North Carolina.
Right.
And that's when I felt good about moving them out. And I thought I was going to be right. And man, I regret that now. But so that's how it worked out for me. But I saw the reasons why you could include them. They played better. I knew there's some new basketball people in the room. Stu Jackson's a guy that's been really great with me out here in the WCC. It's his first year. We have 7 new committee members. That might have been part of the problem. They might have just been following a lot of the guidance and not thinking for themselves in terms of how they voted for these teams. At the end of the day, the committee has to live with how they vote on the teams and accept the results. So some of that subliminal influence, I'm sure, made a difference. And then I would just say also outside of the North Carolina stuff, which is just gone viral, I think everywhere you look, I think the one that's not being discussed enough is Texas. I think that's a crime to have the Longhorns in, far worse than North Carolina, because there was no precedent to take a Texas, absolutely none. There's been 4 other 15 lost teams to get it included, and I've studied those teams to death over the years. One of those was Alabama with Colin Sexton. That team beat multiple 1 seeds on the road that year. So they did something extraordinary, right, that most teams can't do, which demonstrated an ability to perform in the tournament. Then you had a Vanderbilt team around the same time. They did the same thing. They beat 1 seed. They beat a 2 seed. This Texas team, and you got to do it away from home. Beating teams at home doesn't move the needle when you have that many losses. And I've studied, and like I said, I've studied this like year in and year out. They get a Texas A&M win during championship week, which on a neutral court, 4 seed, great. That's a good win. They got, they had chances to win at Florida. They played Tennessee the next day. I might have taken a second look at them if they beat Tennessee. But when you take quad 4 away, their record's 12-15. This is a team that eliminated themselves 2 weeks ago, and they're still getting discussed by this committee. I think it's a terrible precedent. 13 bids wasn't enough. You had to include this team. I was happy for Vanderbilt. Like, I'm friends with Vanderbilt, and I love Rodney Terry at Texas. None of this is personal. This is about the process and about the wins and losses. They're basically telling us the league you're in is more important than your record. And it's I can't explain Texas. I'll never be able to explain Texas.
Well, that's Rocco. This is the reason. This is the whole purpose of why I wanted to have you on, and not because of it's a bracket freak out day and everyone loses their mind about it.
Sure,
but part of it is you mentioned it. You have all these new members in the committee. Why do we have? Stay with me on this, because I know some of the people you've had conversations with these people, and this isn't personal to them. Dave Benedict is a fantastic athletic director at UConn. I don't want him anywhere near a room that would decide whether UConn is going to the tournament or not, men's or women's. Okay, what seed they get, the whole 9. Take athletic directors out of the equation. If you want to have a few basketball consultants and people in there because that would make some people feel better, cool. But why isn't people? You said it. You've studied this for years. I think I read today, there's 130 something legitimate bracketologists, not even some of the crazy yahoos you see on Twitter. I'm talking about people that do this pretty much for a living, or at least it's part of what they do. And but why isn't there like 5 of you, Rocco, in a room for the men and 5 for the women, and get because the women's chair is the Arkansas athletic director. It makes absolutely no sense that and we do the same thing with football, and it just drives me insane, because what you get is people would rather argue about who's in and who's out versus just getting it right, and value, as you mentioned, the process. The process is what's important. If UConn didn't make it this year and it was done because 6 Evan Miyakawas and you all sat in a room and figured out who the best teams are, or they got like a 12 seed because that's what they get, then no one is people are going to still be pissed. But guess what? Who's going to come at you? You go at Bubba Cunningham because he has a vested interest in UNC making the tournament. He'll make money if they go far.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's been this way forever. And honestly, like, the way the process is built out, I serve on multiple mock committees. We had our big one the weekend of Arch Madness, so the weekend before this. Even the way we do it, go hard Thursday through Sunday, do every single step they do. So I have an appreciation for the process and doing that for years now. And then I went straight from that to Las Vegas on Monday, where I got to spend some time with Stu Jackson, who was on this year's committee. So it was a great, from a timing perspective, I had all the information in my head and I shared it with Stu, and he validated everything we did. And, he was also new to the committee this year, and he's telling me about all the different things they have to do just to be on the committee. Like, if a city wants to host a site next year, or like in 5 years, however many years in advance they do it, that you got to fly into that city, they wine and dine you, they show off their city, and you do this like all year long. So being on the committee is a lot more than just these 4 days in the room. There's a whole a good old club about it. And so that provides lots of opportunities to do natural human things, which is, of course, get along, like each other, respect your peers. Of course. And whether it's a conscious thing, it could be subconscious, could be unconscious, knowing that by the time you actually vote and a whole year has gone by on this committee, you're kind of pulling for each other, and in a way, it kind of shows itself. And not to point fingers, it's just human nature. We do it in our own committee. I hammered the Big West like the entire week, just seeing if it would work, and I got like 4 of the 6 guys to vote for Irvine. So even if I had to recuse myself during those discussions later, I would have probably still got my way. And that's just an example. So, I think there's a conflict of interest, but I think the bigger story here, Mark, that's always been there. And sometimes they miss a team, and that's fine. You expect that,
right?
And if it's off, it's off, and you just deal with it. And it doesn't ever really look like it did yesterday. Yesterday felt different because we also know what's going on with college sports as a whole. With the new head of NCAA being a former senator, and this being a big time NIL business at the power of players. You've got leagues like the SEC and the Big Ten threatening to leave the NCAA if they don't get what they want. You can't tell me that made an influence on getting all the way up to 14 bids when they could have easily just been okay with 12 and still broke the record. So they basically turned it into college baseball yesterday, and with just those 2 decisions. And then I think on the Big Ten side, if you look at their top 7 teams, all got in the top 25 seeds. So it just seems like there's some horse trading going on to, hey, you do this for me and I'll get my extra team, or we'll get this team a better seed. It starts to look like that. Obviously, that's all conspiracy, so I'm not going there. But you get what I mean, right? Like there's so much money now. It just makes me wonder if there's ever going to be room for an Irvine, for a 4th Mountain West team, or what have you.
No, I think you're right. Like I think the key points are to make, and I'll make this one for you, is that no one's accusing anyone of doing anything.
Exactly.
But when you decide to do the things that you do, and there's very little explanation from someone like yourself who does this every day and went through like mock committees and kind of talks to the selection committee, and there's still not a lot of validation, because you made a great point about, like, sometimes they get a couple of them wrong. You even said it last time you were on the show. Like, I don't mind getting a few wrong, like maybe on the seed line too. Like if I think someone's a 10 and they end up getting, it's like, whatever, like that's not a big deal. But like when you decide to put someone in that there's no precedent for them to be in, that's when we have questions. And then you start going down the line and being like, okay, this guy's a senator. We're talking about the 2 biggest conferences, potentially pulling out of the NCAA. Oh, and by the way, Bubba Cunningham is also, he'll receive $100K if UNC goes on a run. Like it doesn't seem kosher.
I'm with you. And Bubba's done a great job throwing his weight around during his entire time on the committee. I think the average person that watches college basketball doesn't realize the committee has a term they serve. I think it's a 5-year term. And so you don't get to be chairman until you don't get to be chairman until your last year. So this was his last year. We won't have Bubba next year, but he was vice chair last year and got Virginia in. And I was actually right about that. Like I put the Bubba factor, we call it the Bubba factor in our mocks. And you can go to Bracket Matrix 2024. You'll see I'm like one of only 8 people that had Virginia in, because I put a lot of weight on that. And I did it again this year, and it still kept North Carolina out, which again, regrettable, but also like, what are we doing? So there's that. And he got Notre Dame in 2022 when nobody had Notre Dame in. So, I mean, his whole time on the committee, he's been able to get that extra ACC in there. And to his credit, like that's part of his job. Like it wasn't Bubba's decision to put him on the committee or to allow ADs or conference commissioners to be part of this. But since they are, he's going to go in there and do everything he's got to do for his league and his school. And that's what everybody should be doing. But I think the problem is this year, I was a little foolishly excited, let's just say, Mark. 7 of the 12 members were from non-power. So on the surface, it felt good. Like, okay, maybe we'll get some people standing up for the Irvines, the Drakes, the VCUs of the world. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of the people in those positions would love to one day work in the Power 5 and chase that
Of
and chase
course.
that career.
Of course.
So there's some of that.
Yeah.
So now I don't really know if it matters or not.
Yeah. Well,
but
I'll answer that for you.
anyway, there's so many complicated dynamics like that. Right.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I agree with you. Like, listen, every mid-major coach wants to coach at the high level. I mean, they may love their school, like, you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
it would be I'd be hard pressed to get away from San Diego, UC San Diego, because that, first off, fantastic team, really cool. Thanks for putting me onto them.
Yes.
And
Awesome.
my boy Tom Tankovich out there doing a good job, the assistant coach there.
Love
The squad, but at the same time, if you don't think that entire coaching staff is like, man, if we win that first game, we get parlayed into a bigger job, like it just happens, right?
I mean, they've been getting calls for weeks. I mean, it starts.
I'm sure
it starts early these days. Yep.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna take another quick break, and then we got like 5 more minutes with Rocco. Want to break down a couple of matchups that I have on my board, including UConn's chances of sneaking out of that first weekend against Florida. Good Lord, maybe beating Oklahoma. We'll talk about it coming up after the break. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives you flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need an extra hand for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Finding the right talent if you need help with marketing campaigns, Upwork can connect you with the freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Or fast and easy hiring. Posting a job is free and simple within a day with multiple qualified candidates you can choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with the top talent and grow your business.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
And we're back on Locked On UConn, here with Rocco Miller, my bracketologist here from the bracketeer.org. All right, man. Talk to me about this Oklahoma matchup. I think it's a good matchup on paper for UConn. Not a lot of rim protection for Oklahoma. Not a great defense. They're in like somewhere in the 70s in Ken Palm. They do have a run of good offense in the 20s. I think it's a crazy coaching matchup between Porter Moser and Danny Hurley. Like, these are guys who are grinders, guys who have been at the low major level and just really love being out there and coaching. That's kind of what I'm interested in, mostly but Oklahoma does have two of the best freshmen in the country. So it's not on paper, it looks like it's weird. Oklahoma, UConn, not a traditional matchup here, but talk to me about it. And, what are the pros and cons for UConn in this game? And do you think they're going to win it?
Yeah, I think UConn can hit a higher gear offensively, although Oklahoma has some good performances, in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I thought that game they lost, actually both their losses to Kentucky by 1 point. They played really well in those games, better than I thought they would. And then earlier in the year, they hit a wall. They hit a huge wall, and that's when it looked like they were done. They lost 5 in a row in February, and I remember I was actually in Athens at the Georgia-Missouri game, and that night Oklahoma lost a home game to LSU, and it looked like it was over. It looked like season was over. And the way they lost it, too, I mean, they had the game, and then 3 straight turnovers in the last minute. LSU just stole it from them, and as you know, LSU didn't win very many games in that league. So that was it looked like a showstopper, but to Porter Moser and this team's credit, they kept fighting and wiggled their way in, as almost every SEC team did.
Right.
And so, Jeremiah Fears is clearly a pro, clearly a dynamic talent. It's kind of a crapshoot, I think, these days with the NCAA tournament and how deep into the process we are. Does a guy like Fears, who's a potential first-round NBA pick, go all in on the tournament to try to improve his stock? Or is he happy with all the, they had a bunch of huge games in the SEC. There's plenty of tape on him. Is he cool with just, maybe if UConn gets the first punch in this game? As we know, first round NCAA tournament is so fun. I love watching the first 10 minutes of any of the games just to see how they start and just all the nervous energy, right? Doesn't matter who you're playing. It's a character thing. And so I'll be curious to see how Oklahoma comes out. The other thing going on with them is, and Dayton Forsyth, I think that's the other freshman you were mentioning. He had some big time shooting performances down the stretch. There was a game he had 7 or 8 threes, and that might have been one of those.
He can shoot it.
Yeah, he can really shoot it. But the dynamic around the program has been Porter Moser on the hot seat basically from the first day of the season on. And like I said, that February stretch, it looked like he was gone. Now they got hot, got in. Is it enough? If he loses this game, is he still gone? I don't know the answers. And in today's day and age, they have a lot of seniors. Then they have the 2-star freshmen. Is everybody locked in, or 1 foot in, 1 foot out? I can't tell with this team because I've seen them on nights look really bad, and I've seen them on nights get up to a really high level. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I think both teams, from an offensive standpoint, have a really high ceiling, but both also struggle defensively. So we might get a lot of points on both ends due to that. But by and large, I think, I'll take Hurley any day over Mosier. I love Mosier. Sure. We're friends. We've had plenty of conversations, but I just think obviously Hurley's 2-time national champion coach. McNeely's healthy. There's a world where UConn can kind of get this thing rolling again and try to get pumped up to play Florida if they take care of business in this one.
So let's say hypothetically they do, and they're playing Florida. I think Florida's the best team. I think Florida's the best team in the country. And
can get there.
And they're just because listen, I've watched a lot of SEC basketball and football in this house because of my wife, and so Florida's good.
Yeah.
When I saw them pop up, I was just like, "Oh shit!" That's basically what my response was. Because even if we win and we play a really good game, I look at Alabama, I look at Tennessee, I look at some of these teams in the SEC that are really tough, 2 seed, 1 seeds, 2 seeds, whatever, and at times Florida made them look really silly. Even Auburn, beating them in Auburn, beating them in Auburn, beating Auburn at Auburn, Alabama at Alabama. It's just, I read somewhere that sometimes they're inconsistent, and I was looking at it, I was just where are they inconsistent? They've lost 4 times, and the only game that you could really point to was the South Carolina game in South Carolina where they played like crap and they still won by. So
they squeaked it out. Yep.
It's still a win. They seem to always figure something out. So I don't know. Tell me the prospects, 20%, 10%. If you had to put a number on it, what are your thoughts? It's a neutral site. I think there's a lot of, being Raleigh, I'll be there. That's the good thing. I'll be there. I'm only an hour away. Which is a great thing for me. But at the same time, if UConn beats Oklahoma and they play Florida, they do this all the time, the selection committee. They pretend like they don't, but they'll have tied a record for the most wins in a row in the NCAA tournament with Duke outside of UCLA in the modern era. And then they'll play, likely, the last team to actually win back-to-back championships. So there's a storyline there, right?
That's right.
We've had success in the West. We've beaten a 1-seed Florida the last time in 2014, albeit with a different team. Is there a Dumb and Dumber? So you're telling me there's a chance, or are we looking at a 1 win and out for UConn?
No, I think it's probably better than 20%, but maybe not better than 30, somewhere in there. Mainly because you've got championship pedigree with the coach. Obviously, UConn might be missing a piece or two. Certainly haven't been consistent on defense, and that's the biggest concern in that matchup. You might need to score 100 to win, as other teams have found out in the recent weeks. Walter Clayton and Will Richard are just an unbelievable set of splash brothers from downtown, and then they've got great bigs. I think that's the underrated part of Florida, because Clayton and Richard are so, and Elijah Martin, we all know him from FAU. But you look at Thomas Howe is just a total bulldog. He always has great position for rebounds, great position for defense on the interior. They've gotten incredible sixth man play from Denzel Aberdeen. So a couple times when Martin was out or when Clayton was out, Aberdeen really stepped up. So he's capable of throwing 20 on you. You got Ruben Chinyelu, who, I'm a West Coast guy. He was at Washington State for a while. He's just a scrappy dude, 6'10", throws a lot of weight at you, 260. And Alex Condon's just blown up in the last month or two. And they've loved him since last year and he redshirted. So now he's a redshirt sophomore, 6'11", 230. So they've just got an amazing front line. Micah Hangloden's back too. So it doesn't matter if you get 2 fouls on these guys because they've got backups and backups. And then the guards speak for themselves. Everybody's dangerous from downtown. So they can beat you inside, they can beat you outside, they can one and done you when you miss a shot. And that's how games get ugly. Before you could be tied. You could be tied at halftime, and by the 15-minute mark, you'd be down by 15. So
they remind me.
Yep, go ahead.
They remind me of UConn of last year, and they remind me of even going further back of like an old school Roy Williams team that just has bigs for days. That easy buckets on a night that they're not shooting well. They still shoot 60% because they got these 6'11" guys that are great post moves, and they're just a nightmare. All right, you've scared us enough. Let me ask you one last question before I let you go.
Sure.
These are my Cinderellas. Tell me where I'm right. Tell me where I'm wrong, and if I need to look at somebody else. I love High Point right here in my backyard.
Yes.
It's a tough matchup against Purdue, but I love them. I love Grand Canyon. I'm not really throwing Drake in the category of people. They're 11 seed. They're too well known. Anything below a 12 is out the window. I'm talking about 14s, 13s, and 12s. I love High Point, Grand Canyon, Colorado State, and then there's one more that I absolutely, and UC San Diego. Those are the 4 that I'm rocking with in the first round. What are your thoughts? And am I missing anyone?
Yeah, those are great choices. I would probably agree with all 4. Colorado State's been a top 10 team in the last 6 weeks. If you run the reports on Torvik, just as an easy data point, that's weighted for strength of your opponent. Mm-hmm. So that's just an eye opener. I would say Drake speaks for itself. UC San Diego, to me, speaks for itself, but just for the rest of the country, can't wait for everybody to see them. I actually love the Michigan matchup because and Dusty's – I love Dusty. And
same.
They got some hardware yesterday. So even if UC San Diego takes them out, they had a great season. They can hang a banner. Everybody wins, right? So I like that. And then the High Point one, yes, absolutely, no doubt. I actually don't think Purdue's been playing very well the last month, and High Point's been playing their best basketball the last month. I track them very closely for the poll that I run across mid-major. And then I would also just add, we saw Yale last year beat Auburn. I don't think this Yale team's as strong. Obviously, they don't have Danny Wolf anymore, but John Palakidis, he's just so lights out, and they move the ball so well. Texas A&M is like a totally opposite type of team. They bring a football game to the basketball court. So they could that just could be one of those weird games. There's also like this dynamic, and I don't want to say too much publicly, but there's this dynamic where, Buzz Williams rumored to, he might have worn out his welcome. He only lasted at Virginia Tech 5 years, Marquette 5 years. He's about to hit that 5 years now with A&M, and I think it's there might be a surprise move by him after either this game or whenever they go out. I just think some of those dynamics give Yale a nice little opportunity here to shock the world again, like last year.
I love it. Rocco, appreciate your time as always. We'll see how it all shakes out. And maybe one day when things change, we could actually be talking to the chair of the selection committee one of these days, where you're actually running the show. What do you think about that?
I'll keep fighting the good fight. I'd love to be there, and I'd love to defend why UC Irvine's playing in Dayton tomorrow night instead of North Carolina.
I totally agree. All right. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Rocco Miller, I'm Mark Zanetto asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and go Huskies, man. We got a big one coming up this Friday. I'll be there.
Go Huskies.